Hey guys, before we get into the episode today, I really want to shout out my Facebook group, Tax Strategies for Real Estate Investors. So we have over 5,000 real estate investors in this group from all walks of life. We have long-term rentals, multifamily, mid-term rentals, short-term rentals, commercial properties, syndications, and everything in between. We have people that are co-hosting in there. We have people that are property managing in there. So make sure to join today because we talk about all sorts of things between tax strategies and real estate management, portfolio management, and absolutely everything you can imagine. So if you have questions for me, this is the easiest way to get access to me is to join this group and ask your question. So without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Learn Like a CPA show. Today, we're going to be talking about Proformas and why they are important. A lot of people may not even know what a Proforma is, but what that is it's a sort of a mock financial statement that's prepared anytime you're going to go to analyze a deal. We call it a Proforma. It could also be called a projection, but basically, it's penciling numbers in to see if the deal makes sense. I can't tell you how many people buy deals without Proformas. I just saw yesterday in a Facebook post, this guy, he's building 4 properties in a beach market. Doesn't even have an idea of how much they're going to generate revenue. I think that's absolutely crazy. I will go as far to say as I will not call you an investor unless you know how to run a Proforma. If you do not run Proformas before you buy real estate, you are not an investor. That's a hobby to you. You absolutely need to be penciling the numbers and figuring out if the deal is going to make sense before you go to buy it. I will also say the Proforma kind of tells a story, right? If you come to me and say, I have this deal, I have this awesome property, it's going to do X, Y, Z, but you don't have a Proforma that actually shows the numbers of what it's going to do, and if you try to sell a story rather than the numbers, I'm going to immediately discredit that because you're trying to sell me a story and not necessarily the property. I would also say the follow-up to your Proforma is very important. Oftentimes I see, with clients and people in my Tax Strategy Academy program, a lot of times people will have Proformas, really nice Proformas that they do, but then their bookkeeping is absolutely terrible on the back end. Their bookkeeping is complete shit most of the time. If you're going to do a Proforma, you want to know if what you projected out for your revenue is actually going to make sense. And the only way to do that is by having good, solid bookkeeping. So I would say, number one, Proforma is very important. But once you do close the deal and you're operating it for a few months, keeping that solid bookkeeping to actually know if you did a good job or not is important. Diving into the Proforma, the first general rule of thumb that I'm going to teach you guys today is a purchase price to gross revenue test. So in multifamily, in the long-term rental real estate, they used to call this the 1% rule, or basically, if the 1% of the purchase price could be in monthly rent, it'll probably pencil out. In short-term rentals, we like to use a different test. In short-term rentals, I typically look for anywhere between 18 to 20% of the purchase price should be the gross revenue. So if I'm buying, a $500,000 property, I want to see that gross revenue somewhere in the $80,000 to $100,000 range, right? So, and the reason why is this is just a back of the napkin sort of calculation to see if it makes sense. Can you have a 15-16% gross revenue property and it pencil out? Yeah, especially if your down payment is a lot less, right? Because there's 2 ways really to boost cash on cash. You either have to generate higher income, either more bookings, higher price, offer better amenities, or you have to decrease your initial cash outlay. Now, a lot of people will try to do that, decrease their initial cash outlay, which kind of goes into another whole rant about why I think cash on cash isn't, the best metric to use for identifying properties. I think there's plenty of better metrics to determine if a property is a good investment or not. But back to this gross revenue test, right? So 18 to 20% of the purchase price is going to be what you're going to want to see when it comes to a short-term rent. Why that isn't, 10% like the 1% rule? Well, there's just so much more operating expenses that come into short-term rentals that we don't have in long-term rentals, right? We have to fully stage these things, make that operational. We have to, cover the utilities. We have to cover the garbage. We have to cover all the property management, everything that we have to cover that we probably don't have to cover in a long-term rental. So a general rule on operating expenses. Now, this is what I want to make extremely clear. When I say operating expenses, what I mean basically is all your expenses before your actual debt payment. So this is, sometimes it's also referred to, I'm looking at in my spreadsheet here, I actually have it referred to as net income before debt service is also another term that's used, but it's basically all your expenses before the actual principal and interest payments, right? So a typical healthy operating expense ratio, doing this over the last 2 years, helping hundreds of investors, analyzing over 1,000 properties, a good healthy expense ratio is typically somewhere between the 35 and 50% range when it comes to operating expenses. And why it's so kind of tough there depends on whether or not you're factoring in a property management fee, right? So I would say the thing with deals is what I like to always do is, even if my numbers pencil out to, let's say, 38 or 39, I always like to stress test and push those as high as I can possible towards that 45 or 50% range, just to see if the deal makes sense. Because what I've learned in business and what I've learned in real estate is shit normally takes twice as long as we think it is, and it's going to be twice as expensive as we think it is. So when you're running these numbers, again, you want to have your gross expenses, total expenses before your debt service at a healthy ratio, right? So again, anywhere between, like I said, 35 to 50%, depending on if you have property management or not. Now, some things to look into specifically when running a Proforma, the tax implications we're looking into. Now, I'll give you some hints. So what we do for this is, generally, anytime a property sells, it's going to trigger a reassessment, which means the property taxes are going to have to be reassessed, basically. So if your property tax bill was, let's say, $10K, and you buy let's say the property tax bill is $10K, you buy the property, now it gets reassessed, maybe it's $12K, maybe it's $13K. Sometimes it doesn't change at all, depending on when it was last reassessed. Now, one of the things to look for in there is what I'll do for that, and it's awesome because I'll go look at 4 or 5 other properties that are in the area, typically within 2-mile radius, same bedroom count, same bath count, similar square footage, and I want to see how high their property tax bill shot up after they bought the property. So I'm looking at 2021, maybe 2022 sales and seeing what the tax reassessment was. So if I go find 4 or 5 properties and they all went from $10,000 to $12,000 a year, I could probably assume that my property tax bill is going to increase by 20%. Now, what this also does for you is, because you're looking at the property tax card, another thing that I teach in my tax academy program is understanding the breakout between building and land. And this is extremely important for those in high income that are trying to use real estate to offset some of their W-2 income or offset some of their business income. Is the building to land value is extremely important when it comes to properties. You could buy $1 million property in the Smoky Mountains and $1 million property in, let's say, Gulf Shores or Destin. And because you bought it in the Smoky Mountains, where the land is worth like nothing compared to the land in Gulf Shores could potentially be worth 40 or 50% of your purchase price, you're going to get not only half, you're going to get 25% of the tax benefit in Gulf Shores that you would have gotten in the Smoky Mountains. And so when you go through this exercise to figure out what the property tax bill is going to be, you can also look at the breakout between building and land to know what you can expect from a tax perspective. Now, I'll throw in another little tip there. Typically, areas that are going to have very low land value, which is what you want. I'll just say it. It's going to be red states. It's going to be states with low property taxes. It's going to be states that do not have, it's not going to be on a beach. It's not going to be on an ocean. It's not going to be San Francisco, where the land is worth so much, right? Now, one key thing is, if you do have condos, if you do have HOAs, typically, if you have condos, townhomes, you're not going to own the land most of the time. The condo or the HOA or the homeowners association, whatever, they own the land. So that same $1 million property in Gulf Shores, as long as you have, as long as it's a condo and you don't own the land, you get the max tax benefit there. So I know a lot of people will shy away from buying condos because they don't appreciate as much, but you do get a lot more tax breaks and tax benefits of buying condos. The last thing I will say about the tax implications is you want to see how long the current owners own the property. In most cases, if you've got a mom and pop or a family that's lived there for 15, 20 years, that property tax bill has been reassessed every now and then. But because the property hasn't transacted or sold, you typically don't see that high of reassessments, generally speaking. So that's one thing that I'm always looking at. I'm taking special note whenever I'm looking at a property that isn't a short-term rental or it's just been owned by somebody for many, many years. You typically can go to the same place you're going to find all the property tax information. You can go on there and find out what the property tax, how long the current owner has owned the property. And based on that, you're going to know whether or not it's been reassessed or not. And you can know that, hey, it's probably going to get reassessed a little bit higher than I think it is. I think I covered the tax implications. Let's go ahead and do insurance. So insurance has been a really hot topic, especially if you're in those beach, Florida markets where your insurance can go, it can go up tremendously, right? Hurricanes just hit Fort Myers Beach. Hurricanes have been hitting, North Carolina, our race area. So insurance, you really want to, get a few quotes on insurance, and because that can skyrocket at a moment's notice. Another thing I would say about insurance is look into whether or not the property needs flood insurance or not, because that could be an extra $1,000. And I've actually seen people lose deals over not having flood insurance in time. Flood insurance, basically, like I'm under contract on a property right now in Miami that the current owners do not have flood insurance. However, the property is in a flood zone, and so now anybody going to buy the property needs flood insurance. Now, typically, most of the time, the flood insurance is actually transferable. So if you go to the current owner and say, hey, would you be able to transfer your flood insurance over to me? The lender will typically allow that to happen. So this is another thing to keep in mind, because we have seen insurance just go bonkers. I've seen insurance go $8,000 a year to $13,000 a year in Gulf Shores. I've seen it increase a lot. So it can really kill deals, especially if you tack on high property tax bills, if you tack on HOA fees. That's why, I've been looking in the Florida market for a long time. I've been looking to buy something in Florida, but I just haven't been able to find anything that's cuts it up, because it's either property taxes, insurance, or HOAs that have been absolutely killing the deal. The next thing I'll talk about is utilities and, your property implications. So in a market like the Smoky Mountains, you're going to have to drain the hot tub after every time the guest leaves, which, that incurs an extra cost because, unless your cleaner, most of the cleaners know how to do it, but unless your cleaner knows how to, properly handle the hot tub and a little bit of electrical stuff, that's going to increase your costs. In the Smoky Mountains, they also have a lot of bugs and stuff. I've stayed in cabins in the Smoky Mountains that have had literally spiders on the wall before. You're going to probably have a pest control bill monthly, probably going to pay $40 or $50 a month for just pest control. So understanding the market that you're in and the types of expenses that you're going to have that you may not be thinking of. And the best way to do this is probably to actually, it's kind of a little of a dirty method in my opinion, but you can either call up current owners that in that area to ask them about some of their expenses. Maybe have them send you a couple of profit and loss statements and just blank out their numbers to show you percentages. That would help a lot. Or, like I said, the really dirty method is to go to call up property management companies and kind of pretend like you want them to manage your cabin and ask them about some of these expenses. Again, I would never recommend somebody to call somebody who's you're not actually trying to transact business with, because you're just wasting their time. But it is a method I've seen people use. So after factoring all your expenses into your pro forma, the thing that's going to make or break your deal is how do you finance it. The financing in most of these deals is what I've seen make or break, because debt service matters and your cash on cash return matters. Now, generally speaking, the less money you put into the deal, the higher your cash on cash is going to be. And it's just basic math, right? When we go back to how much the property generating per year versus how much I actually have to put into the deal, it's either those two numbers. You boost your revenue or you lower your cash outflow going into the deal. And this is why I think it's very important to, why I think cash on cash maybe not be the best metric here is because you and I can come to the closing table with two different types of loans. If you're putting 10% down because you're using a vacation home loan, you're probably going to have better terms. You're going to have better rates. You're going to have less cash outlay than if maybe I'm putting 25% down. And so just understand that, I was talking to somebody a couple months back at a Miami Mastermind meeting, and they're like, hey, we have awesome gross revenue numbers, but I don't know why our cash on cash is less than other people's. And I look at it and I'm like, you don't have any debt. They bought the house all cash. And no wonder their cash on cash is very subpar, is because they brought, the full amount of money to the closing table, so they didn't have a mortgage or interest. So understanding that value there, and that relationship between your cash on cash return and how do you finance the property is very important, right? So you're going to have, again, gross revenue. Let's say gross revenue is 100%. Then you're going to have, again, typically 35 to 50% as your operating expenses before debt service. So then whether or not the property actually makes money or not, it's going to depend on what your debt service looks like. Now, we're going to go into like a little pro forma here that I drew up. Now, what I say is percentages matter. So I have seen people, I've seen my mentor has picked apart some of my deals, and all he did was drag a column from all the percentages, and he can know right away whether or not something looks kind of funky or not based on the percentages of the gross revenue. And it's because these things, this is not rocket science, it's not new. We know what these things cost to run, and so I think the percentages really matter. Now, what you'll see here is this is just a basic deal or property that I'm under contract for. It's asking $1 million. It actually is currently a rental right now, doing really well, doing $200,000 a year of gross revenue now. And so we're going to put probably 35 to 40 grand of renovation costs into it, just to get it staged, you get it a little bit better looking. But here's what you're looking at. So you're looking at $200,000 gross revenue on this property is what it's currently doing. Again, that 20%, that rule that I told you kind of pencils out. Going over to how we finance it, we're going to use 20% down. We're going to use 30-year loan at a 6.5% interest rate. And look at our expenses. So again, property taxes, $1,200 a month. We're expecting a very high property tax bill along with insurance because the property is a Florida. It does have an HOA. It has these utilities. We're going to have to pay Airbnb, transaction fees. We're going to have to pay cable and internet, repairs and maintenance are a thing, automation costs. We're going to have some sort of cleaning and pest control. And then like I said, I always factor in some sort of management fee into my properties too, because, the goal of real estate really isn't to, that's just manage these things all the time. Is really to be passive in the hand some of these things off. So what I'll see here, again, you'll have my gross operating expense ratio at 44%. Now, what I like to do is, even if this thing is less than 45 to 50%, I like to stress test this as much as possible and bump this thing up a little bit. So you'll see in this example that the cash on cash return is 23%, which kind of meets my criteria of I want to have a property with at least a 20% cash on cash return. You'll see some other little principles in here like debt service coverage ratio. So, when I was in school of finance, typically a healthy DSCR was about 1.25. I've seen lenders do loans out of 1. I didn't even see them come as lower than 1, which I think is absolutely crazy. But DSCR, healthy DSCR coverage, 1.5 or higher in my opinion. And what I'm looking at here also too is the payback period. So the payback period represents how quickly you're going to recoup your investment. So at a 23% cash on cash return, I can expect to recoup my payback period. I can expect to get my money back within 4 years. No, of course I factored in the tax benefits here. So let's just say, I'm married, I make 250 grand a year, and this is my rental income. Well, the tax savings on this particular property, they're going to bump my cash on cash return from 23% all the way up to 46% because I'm saving about $60,000 a year in taxes on this property that I can plug into my initial investment and generate a higher cash on cash return. So a lot of stuff in here, I would say I want to call out a few other things too. I want to call out beware of area comps. So generally, most of these single-family homes that we're going to be buying are going to be treated based on comparable values. And why that kind of sucks is if I have typically a commercial property or multifamily property, I'm able to boost the net operating income of the property. I can typically trade into a cap rate, and that's going to be how those type of properties are valued. But because short-term rentals, appraisers are still seeing short-term rentals as single-family homes, your property is going to sell for or finance at whatever a reasonable property in the area is. So just keep that in mind. The last thing I will say about this too is when you get really good at this, you could also reverse engineer and back into a purchase price, right? Because all this is percentages. If I know that I need to make, let's say 25% net operating income after debt service, I need to have a 25% cash on cash return. Well, I could then factor in what are my operating expenses going to be, and then I could factor in, well, what does the gross revenue on the property need to be? And then I could back into an amount that I actually should pay on the property. So in order to boost this property up to, let's say, a 25% cash on cash return, I need to lower the asset price I need to lower the offer price of the property, right? So in order to boost that to 25%, if I was to lower the purchase price amount down to $970 instead of $1 million, I should get to my 25% cash on cash return. like I said, a lot of people, when they look at short-term rentals or numbers, they start with the purchase price and then they trying to figure out what net income number they could get on that and then whether or not it's a good deal. What I would recommend really savvy investors, what they do is they're going to figure out what the net operating income of that property is going to be after the debt service, and they're going to back into a price, a discounted cash flow of what they're actually willing to pay for the property. So this is a template. You guys can find this on my website. Go to learnlikeacpa.com, free tools. It's also going to be linked in the show notes below, but this is just a little Pro-Forma template that you guys can use to run your properties. So that's going to wrap up today's podcast. I know we deep dive into your Pro-Forma, but I think it really needs to be done here. No, I see people buy deals all the time, making $1 million investment decisions, and they don't even have a Pro-Forma, let alone they don't even know what the gross revenue of the property is going to be, which I think, like I said, is an absolute disservice. So thanks again, guys, and we will see you in the next episode.